Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a Tony Hawk can, unless he's played by myself. That would not be good for his health. Look out, this song's gone on too long. Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Weekly Waypoint, if indeed you are still with us. Today, we are continuing our playthrough of the Tony Hawk's franchise, this time Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. In this one, you can be Spider-Man. I like this one. In case you didn't join us last week, a few caveats. I'm not good at this game. Last week I cited my inability to manual for the reason why I'm not very good at the game. This time I'm going to lean on the fact that it's still a PS1 game. The controls still feel less responsive. The kind of grace period for how far you can lean when manualing or grinding on a rail feels crueler than what I'm used to. We are mostly revisiting these games to just have a look at them, so apologies for not busting out 1 million plus scores every round, or any round. Once again, we are devoid of music because the copyright gods would strike us down in their wrath, so we're just going to have to make do with migrating tones. Wait, migrating tones? No, hang on a minute, where's my voice going? Wait, no, come back. As I played Pro Skater 2 today, I came to realize a few things. Firstly, despite my many years of experience playing Tony Hawk games, I don't know what the point of reverting is. Does it just refresh your combo points for different moves that you do? Does it change your combos? The second point was inevitably, I've never really bothered to learn any combos. I've got to a point in my Tony Hawk's career in the newer games where I can rack up some decent high scores fairly easily now. But there's still definitely some stuff I've yet to learn. Such as, don't kickflip off of every trick you do. That's like half the reason you fall off your dang board. But yeah, in between last week's video and this week's video, I've actually been playing some older Tony Hawk's titles. I played some Tony Hawk's Underground, which we'll probably be revisiting later in this retrospective. And I think I mentioned this last week as well, actually. I played some more Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, which is not Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. It is instead the very first remaster of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, and it is a PS3 era game that you can sadly no longer obtain digitally. I mean, not unless you know someone who's in the business of forging hook hands and peg legs. As such, it's been fun kind of playing this game, Pro Skater 2, and seeing the original versions of these levels that I've seen up-resed in various different games and being like, wow, look at School 2, it's all polygonal. By the way, I think this was maybe my worst run of the lot. But yeah, as far as earlier Tony Hawk's entries go, I'm not sure Pro Skater 2 is going to be one that I'm coming back to when I have an itch to play a Tony Hawk game. Tony Hawk's game? God, the grammar on that is weird. Pro Skater 3 might be the furthest back I can go and feel comfortable with. I might have to eat those words next week though, we'll see what happens. Now, before we segue into our next topic, this weekly waypoint, I do just want to make a quick mention to my new second channel. If you are not aware, I have created a new second channel called Kritigri Talk Stories. At Kritigri Talks will get you there, and it's where I'm going to be putting all of my future book reviews, so blurbal reasonings, all of my future thoughts on Doctor Who's, all that kind of content is going to be over there for the foreseeable. I am going to keep yammering on about this because it's kind of tough to get the message out, and so far that channel ain't doing numbers. And while I'm not in this business to do numbers, it is a little disheartening to put a video on a new channel and see it do less than it otherwise would. I'm like, oh, I feel like a silly goose. Why am I doing this thing? Please help me justify my life decisions, viewer. Anyway, moving on. In terms of video games I've been playing this week, which aren't about a man on a wooden board trying not to break all of his limbs when attempting to look cool for an invisible crowd of spectators. Boy, that segue got away from me. The main thing to kind of report, I guess, are we reporting, is this news, is that I've finally eased back into a comfortable MMO to fire up and play for hours at a time. For people who have been following week to week, you may know that my brain has not been able to settle on a game, and I think it's because I'm used to having a steady game. A little fast food snack in shape of long-form repetitive progression, and viewer, I'm so pleased with myself. That was the 7th take of that sentence. It was really difficult to say. Look, I can't help it if my brain just naturally organizes my thoughts into tongue twisters, but with the power of editing on my side, anything is possible. Anyway, right, shut up, got it, get to the point. RuneScape 3, I'm playing RuneScape 3 again. There's not much more to say, really. I'm clicking buttons, I'm watching my guy smack a hammer on an anvil and listening to Mistborn. If you want to hear more about Mistborn, go to my new YouTube channel in the description below. I finally have a thing that I can sit down and go, I'm gonna veg out with a video game, and I know what to click, and I know how to get to that zen state of vegging out without frantically flipping through my games library and screaming in eldritch horror because I don't know how to live. I am of course being hyperbolic, but it has been a messy few weeks. But worry not, RuneScape is not the only thing I've been sticking my eyeballs on. There's a Steam sale this week, which is bloody rude timing because I already spent most of my gaming budget this month, but I could squeeze a couple low budget titles in. I picked up 2 games. One of them I already own because I have a problem. Back in 2020 I picked up Immortals Phoenix Rising for the Series S for the low price of £34.99. I know, I checked, and in this Steam sale I picked up Immortals Phoenix Rising Gold Edition with all the DLC, which has been reviewed badly, but whatever, for £7.49, so I can justify it and say, hey, it's like buying a DLC pack for £7.49. You get what I'm doing, we've been here before with other games. And I've only put an hour into it so far, but yeah, I'm here to report that Immortals Phoenix Rising is still a solid 8 out of 10. It is Ubisoft map vomit meets Breath of the Wild meets ancient Greek mythology, and if that sounds like the kind of thing you'd enjoy, that game is probably for you. If it doesn't sound like the kind of thing you'd enjoy, don't make yourself play it, you masochist. The other game I bought is one I've never played before, or own anywhere else. Well, hey, we're making progress. I feel like I've developed a new narrative style, and I don't know why, but we're going with it. That game being Warhammer Vermintide 2, and if you look really closely, you might be able to see some progression between me playing Darktide and me playing this game. Again, I've not put a super duper music looper amount of time into this game yet, but I've played enough to realize it's kind of a better version of Darktide. Despite being released earlier, Darktide's basically Vermintide 3, but it's set in 40k universe. But gameplay wise, it's supposed to be a sequel, and it feels like it's not. I wrote down 3 reasons somewhere why it's better. Reason number 1. Each character, of which there are 5 instead of 4, has 4 unique classes each, one of which is DLC, but that's a lot of different playstyles when compared to Darktide, or at least it seems that way. I've not put a huge amount of time into either game, so it could just be that Darktide has more talent, variation, and that's how it gets its gameplay variability. But from like a surface level, it definitely looks like there's more replayability and progression in Vermintide 2 because of that reason. Number 2, there's kind of a story structure where there isn't in Darktide. In Darktide, while you can do the missions in a way that progresses, Vermintide 2 has them set up in kind of a 3-act structure, which feels really nice. And number 3, perhaps most importantly, you can play with AI. You can load into a match with AI buddies, and then players can just matchmake into those, possessing them like vengeful spirits who don't play the game as well, or perhaps better. And therefore, if you're not picky about playing with AI, there's no waiting for matchmaking to happen or anything like that. And also, I didn't write this one down, but I guess it's impressive that the game is still being supported. It just had its 7-year anniversary event, so that's cool. And in the 2 missions I've played so far, that's the extent of my experience. Please don't point and laugh at me. I have a very fragile ego. I will cry. I haven't had any trouble finding players who are gonna pop up and join my match and be like, hey, why aren't you going for grimoires? And then I'm like, hi, person in voice chat that I didn't know was a thing. I don't know what those are. I'm sure you can turn that off, it's fine. But anyway, as you may remember, I recently read through the first Gotrek and Felix novel, and I therefore have been discovering that version of the Warhammer world, and I was really excited to see it in gameplay form, and I'm having a great time smashing rats' faces in. Oh, they know what they did, they deserved it. Honestly, if I wasn't doing this Tony Hawk retrospective thing right now, I would probably have used some Vermintide 2 gameplay footage for this week's Weekly Waypoint. Maybe in the future. Oh, I've been playing as the Dwarf Survivalist, so I've been having fun shooting rats with a crossbow. I also dabbled with 2 Point Campus, which I picked up in the Jingle Jam Yogscast charity bundle over Christmas and have been meaning to get to. Haven't sunk too much time into it yet, but I had a great time playing what I played of it. It's just like a really pleasant game to spend time in, which I suppose is an important thing if you're going to be doing like a sim management style game. You want people to enjoy spending time in a game client. There's just a nice radio with boppy music, and there's silly jokes that play over the intercom and stuff. It's a great time. I've never got super into like a sim management or tycoon game in my life, but I think 2 Point Campus might be where I'm headed for it. Okay, but enough about stinky interactive media. Should we talk about comics? I like comics. You can't fail a kickflip and faceplant the floor in a comic, not unless you draw it that way, in which case I have questions about your narrative style. So, continuing on from the idea that this is a sequel to the episode from a few weeks ago where I played Dark Tide. In that episode, I talked about starting a Kindle Unlimited trial and exploring the service and seeing if it was worth it for me, and I came to the conclusion that it was, so long as I used pretty much every aspect of it. It wasn't good for any individual thing, at least not for me as like an epic fantasy enjoyer, in terms of books, because if it's going to take me a month to read the book, I might as well buy the book for the same price and not worry about losing it afterwards. Similarly, it did not have an exhaustive selection of comics, but it did have trade paperback scans, which was an interesting format to read them in, and it had magazines and stuff too. Kindle Unlimited is probably worth it for a lot of people, but I cancelled my thing before it could charge me for a few reasons. The main one is I finished volume 3 of the Flash Rebirth, or not the Flash Rebirth, but the run of the Flash that took place after Rebirth, with the Rebirth branding on the top. God, comics are weird. And in between volume 3 and volume 4, a crossover thing with Batman happened that seemed really important to the events of Barry Allen's life, and I went to look up what it was. It's called The Button, and it was not on Kindle Unlimited, and I went, I realized I was using Kindle Unlimited primarily for reading DC Comics, and at that point, just get a DC Universe Unlimited subscription. What are you doing? That's not what it's called. Shit. That's what it's called. Fuck, I'm an idiot. DC Universe Infinite subscription. Anyway, I've done that, and I'm continuing to enjoy comics. Last time I had DC Universe Infinite, I was doing a great big reading order list thing where I was reading through a curated list of old Flash comics to kind of like get the full continuity, the full context of everything that happens in his life, or their lives, because the mantle of the Flash passes, so on and so forth. But I decided that instead of overthinking it, I'm just going to continue reading the era I was reading, because turns out volume 1 of the Flash after Rebirth is a bloody good jumping on point, mostly because Rebirth, I mean, okay, you think it wouldn't be, right, from this description, but the Rebirth event basically took 2 different continuities of DC Comics and slammed them together and said everything is canon. That sounds like you need a lot of prior knowledge about what happened in previous comics. Actually, weirdly, at least as far as the Flash goes, no, it doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like a nice fresh start. Like, there's obviously things which happened in the past, but they actually do a great job of either quickly explaining it to you, and not in a way that feels like an info dump, or just, you know, not making you feel like you've been left out of some important events. It doesn't feel like a sequel to a story I haven't read. As opposed to the Fresh Start era of Amazing Spider-Man, which felt like anything but a fresh start and just kept info dumping things that had happened in the past to me, to the point where it was so distracting, I just gave up on it. I don't know if that's a common opinion about that comic run, but that's mine. I've just realized I'm playing as Spider-Man and bashing Spider-Man and evangelizing DC. I just want to make it very clear. I love both Marvel and DC. We're all adults here, it's 2025, I think we can all agree that Marvel and DC can both have great comics without some paradoxical microcosm devouring what's left of our reality. But as far as Marvel versus DC comparisons go, there is something about DC, and it's hard to put my finger on what, but there is something about DC Comics which I think I prefer just a little bit over Marvel. Obviously I love Spider-Man, obviously I love Daredevil, some of the best comics I've ever read in my life. But I think what I love most about DC Comics is the fact that Superman, Batman, Flash, they all have their own cities. You know, the other heroes too, like the Teen Titans and Wonder Woman. They all have their own settings, their own locations, and that allows them to kind of have differentiation in tone and feel a little bit more than maybe Marvel heroes. Most Marvel comics take place in New York, and I think it just gets a little bit stale and a little bit cluttered in terms of what it feels like in that setting. But then again, the 1998-2009 run of Daredevil comics is some of the best comics I've ever read, and probably will remain that way throughout most of my life, because goddamn, that was some good stuff. But yeah, I still have my year of Marvel Unlimited going on till pretty much the end of the year. I think I bought it pretty much January. But this is usually what happens, to be fair. I get a year of Marvel Unlimited, I read a bunch of Marvel comics, and my brain goes, DC, and I end up getting a DC subscription on top of it. This time I just took the long way around by going, ooh, Kindle Unlimited, Amazon. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, that's another contributing factor to why I'm not doing that. Amazon. I don't need to tell you about Amazon, you know about Amazon. In terms of books I've been reading this week, I've been absolutely steaming through Mistborn, finishing the first book earlier this week, and I am making my way through book number 2. For those of you not aware, this is a reread. I first read these books in 2017, and I guess we could talk about that a little bit, actually, because I'm very hesitant to reread anything at the minute, because I had a little bit of a, oh no, there are so many things I want to read and so little lifetime in which to read them. But I want to read Era 2 of Mistborn, and I don't remember a whole bunch of Era 1, despite absolutely loving it. Also, I'm not going to do spoilers, don't worry. But yeah, I briefly touched on this last week, but I decided, like, I want to figure out if rereading is a good idea, or if just continuing on without doing so, because you don't really need to do so, apparently, because, you know, it's a brand new era, brand new story and all that. Would that have been the better play? And I'm in a similar boat with a fantasy series called The Realm of the Elderlings, so with that one I am not going back and rereading the first trilogy, but with Mistborn I did. Well, and the main thing I was worried about with a reread was that it was going to feel a little bit too, you know, as I was reading it, it would come back to me. That feeling when you fall asleep reading a book and the next day you go back a few pages, and while you need to do that because you didn't fully take everything in, there is a staleness to everything you're reading as you remember it as you go. I am pleased to report that that is not the case when it's been 8 years since you've read a book. I go into this a little bit in my actual review over on the Kritigri Talks channel. I swear I'm not just trying to shill this to you at every opportunity. But yeah, while there's definitely some, like, broad sweeps of the story that I remember, and I'm interested to notice bits of foreshadowing for, etc. There were also fairly large revelations that caught me completely by surprise, and I'm astonished that I forgot about them. And I realized something. When I think back on some of my favourite stories and realise how much of them I've forgotten, I get sad. I thought to myself, I wish I could remember every detail of these stories forever, because I guess then I could spend more time reading new stories. But I'm realising I was wrong about that, because forgetting what happened in Mistborn allowed me to rediscover it in a way which was really fulfilling. Forgetting your favourite stories is actually kind of a good thing, because you get to experience them again. And experiencing a story you love all over again is more fun than just knowing of it perpetually. It might leave theoretically less time for you to explore new stories, but ultimately you're only going to revisit your favorites, and how often are you going to find absolute favorite stories in your lifetime? You're probably just increasing the ratio of really good stories that you enjoy that you're reading. So there's my new outlook on that, I guess. Something journey before destination, winks at camera. There's always another secret, tips Fedora, kickflips into the sea. I'm sorry, that Fedora comment was uncalled for. Oh, I guess before we completely exit the realm of talking about things that I'm reading, I should mention that I should probably finish Watchmen before my Kindle Unlimited subscription expires, because I bought the $6.99 a month subscription of DC Universe Infinite, which isn't infinite. It doesn't have everything. There's a premium DC Universe Infinite. What are we doing, man? What are we doing with language? Can we just go back to hieroglyphs? I don't know how the ancient Egyptians spoke hieroglyphs to each other. I'm imagining it was a little bit like charades. Okay, I know this is a tour of all of the levels in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but I did cut the helicopter drop level for time, because it is literally just a half pipe that I cannot get a good score on to save my life, so please forgive me for that. It also cuts down on the rambling needed to reach the end of the video. I don't know how I'm going to approach the later games in the series, which have more than 10 levels to them, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe we'll do like a part 1 and a part 2. Then again, if I do that, we might actually run into the release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 before we're done. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. We are approaching the end of the video. If you have any thoughts on any of my thoughts, feel free to leave your thoughts in the box where the thoughts go. One final obnoxious reminder about my new channel, it is in the description below if you want to go and check it out if it is your kind of thing. We talked a bit about stories today, it's going to be more of that, but hopefully more coherent. Okay, thanks for coming along, catch you later, have a good one. Goodbye.